Hello, I'm Lina Khmoudou. Welcome to Africa 54. Here is what's coming up. Israel's military bombardments of targets in Gaza continue as humanitarian agencies say Palestinians' death toll is reliable despite doubts from U.S. President and others. A big day ahead for Rugby fans as they witness a rematch between the Springboks of South Africa and the All Blacks of New Zealand on Saturday's 2023 World Cup finals. And in entertainment, Heather Maxwell explores the roots of Malawi's banjo music with the Madalitso Band. All that and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. As Israel continues its bombardments of targets in Gaza, fears continue to grow about what a ground invasion would mean for the more than 200 hostages reported to be held there by Gaza's ruling Islamist Hamas movement and other militant groups. An official of Hamas visiting Moscow said a ceasefire in Israel's bombardment would be a condition for the release of hostages in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's military said late Thursday it again carried out a ground operation in the Gaza Strip. The Israel Defense Forces said the raid was brief as its tanks and infantry engaged Hamas fighters and struck anti-tank weapons before returning to Israeli territory. The IDF operation, the second of its kind in as many days, was its latest incursion as it makes preparations for a promised full-scale ground invasion. Additional airstrikes, which have ravaged parts of the Gaza Strip where residents are running out of food, water, and other supplies, followed the latest incursion. Gaza has been hit by unrelenting Israeli airstrikes in response to the cross-border attack by Hamas gunmen into southern Israel on October 7th. Israel says Hamas killed some 1,400 people, mostly civilians. Israeli officials have pledged to ensure Hamas can no longer carry out attacks that threaten Israel. Meanwhile, the U.S. military launched airstrikes early Friday on two locations in eastern Syria linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, according to Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder. In a statement, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said, quote, "These precision self-defense strikes are a response to a series of ongoing and mostly unsuccessful attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria by Iranian-backed militia groups that began on October 17th. U.S. President Joe Biden has cast doubt on casualty figures provided by Palestinian officials in Gaza, but international humanitarian agencies consider them broadly accurate and historically reliable. VOA's Paul Ndio has more.
The Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry has issued a 212-page document on Thursday, which it said contained names and ID numbers of more than 7,028 people killed in Gaza since the fighting began. Most of them were civilians, including 2,913 children. Although there is no dispute that Israel attacks on Gaza have killed many people since Hamas fighters attacked Israel on October 7th, U.S. President Joe Biden and the Israeli military questioned the Gaza Health Ministry's casualty figures. The Hamas movement controls the ministry. Israel has been bombarding the Palestinian territory since Hamas gunmen crossed the border. Israel officials say they killed 1,400 people, mostly civilians, and kidnapped more than 220 others. In a press conference in Geneva on Thursday, the Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, Ibrahim Karishi, defended the latest Gaza casualty figures and criticized the Biden administration for questioning the numbers. Israel and Palestine director at the Human Rights Watch, Omar Shetty, said the numbers were generally consistent and did not have any major discrepancies. Officials with the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees said in the past conflict in Gaza, the health ministry's casualty figures have been considered credible. With tens of thousands of Israeli troops amassed alongside the Gaza border, ahead of a widely expected offensive, the army said its forces had staged a brief ground incursion into central Gaza. Tanks and infantry had staged a similar raid targeting the Islamist Hamas in northern Gaza the previous night, the army said. Paul Diho, VOA News.
For more on the conflict, let's go to VOA correspondent Jan Bochat, who is standing by in East Jerusalem. Jan, earlier you were in Jenin. Tell us what you have seen today.
There was another funeral today. 4 people were killed in Jenin last night during Israeli forces incursion. And there was a lot of armed people there. I could see a lot of people with guns there, especially rifles, people from the Islamic Jihad, supporters of Hamas, and even I saw a guy with ISIS flag there. I could say there were a lot of anger there, as in all the West Bank, and people there were promising to fight back. They don't want to. They say they don't want to stay there just watching what's going on in Gaza.
So those who are able to leave are leaving, but what is being done for those who cannot leave, such as the elderly and the disabled?
In Gaza, you mean?
Yes, in Gaza, yes.
Well, nobody can leave Gaza right now. Gaza is completely closed. People are trying to leave the northern part of Gaza to go to the south.
Yes.
But as UN says, a lot of people are displaced. They don't have a place to go. A lot of people are sleeping on the streets. The situation is very dire there.
There are reports that negotiations are underway for the hostages with the hope that they will be released by Hamas. What is the latest regarding these negotiations?
So far, we only have rumors, nothing solid. But there's a lot of talk that Hamas can hand over the hostages to Iran. They would try to broke a ceasefire. But those are rumors. We don't have anything solid about this. And Israel says it's preparing for its ground invasion, and the fight continues.
Talk to us about what is being done in the Jenin camp to help those who are there.
Well, the situation there is very difficult. The Israeli forces are doing almost daily incursions there. There's a lot of violence. I could see today places where there was fighting there. You could see bullet holes everywhere. You could see blood on the ground. They say that the people from there, they say the situation, it's really difficult because the Israeli forces are entering the camp almost every day to try to arrest people they say are linked to Hamas.
You've been speaking to both camps. What transpires really when people talk to you? What is their hope?
Well, I would say there's less and less hope. People saying that the situation is just getting worse. All the negotiations that the Palestinian Authority have been trying the last decades, they say it didn't work. And what I can see, I think everybody can see, is that Hamas and all those factions that defend, they advocate for a more aggressive position against Israel are getting more power, are getting more support from the people there.
Jan, thank you. VOA correspondent Jan Bochat reporting from Jerusalem. Now, as conflict escalates in Gaza, aid agencies say the humanitarian crisis is also worsening. Food and water are running out while hospitals struggle to function without enough fuel and electricity. During her conversation with Hedy Adams on Straight Talk Africa, Abby Maxwell, President and CEO of Oxfam America, shared the challenges of getting and distributing aid in Gaza and describes the situation her colleagues on the ground are experiencing.
People have left their homes and they had nothing with them when they fled bombs, and they need almost everything. Basic supplies running out. critical needs in the basics of hygiene materials. There are reports already of scabies, diarrhea, and other diseases that we know have huge impact on children and women and families, and they're being reported due to the crowded conditions. About half of Palestinians in Gaza are now displaced from their homes, and many are sheltering in hospitals, churches, schools, vehicles which can't move because of the lack of fuel. People need shelter that is safe. And as the situation there remains so uncertain and dangerous, people also need a way to communicate. Without electricity or internet, they are feeling more cut off from the world and extremely vulnerable, finding creative ways on car batteries to charge their phones so that they can get information and share information. Access to medical care. We know that hospitals are in their last hours of fuel and are truly overwhelmed. And what we really need is an end to hostilities so that actual life-saving aid at the levels that are required can be accessed.
Talk to us about some of the logistical challenge around getting aid into Gaza and what could help or complicate those efforts in coming days and weeks.
Well, even before the most recent escalation, Gaza has always been a challenging place to deliver aid. And now the challenges in delivering aid are enormous. People's movement is restricted, commercial crossings are closed, local markets and trade are failing, communication networks and internet have failed, and it's impossible for agencies like Oxfam and all of us to restart the scale of humanitarian operations that are necessary in the face of bombs, shells, rockets, bullets that our staff are experiencing. And without electricity and fuel, water can't be pumped, waste can't be treated, bakeries can't bake breads, hospitals can't function properly or safely. Ordinary civilians have already borne the brunt of the violence, and Gaza is facing a double blow as it escalates and they're cut off from public services. And indeed, the aid, the trucks going in are like a drop in the ocean of need.
Abby, help us understand what typically happens once these aid convoys arrive in sort of a conflict zone. Where does it go and how is it distributed?
Now, typically, the organizations distributing the aid have done assessments to ensure how the aid can reach the most vulnerable as expeditiously and safely as possible, targeting children, pregnant and lactating women and mothers and elderly and others. And in many cases, large organizations were working in partnership with community volunteers and leaders to identify those people to help with the distributions. And in this case, where the need is so massive that everybody, aid workers and families and communities alike, are in such a situation. The aid being delivered is so small proportional to the need, and it's highly sensitive and complex. And these choices of who to prioritize are excruciating. And this is why we are calling for an end to the siege in addition to more aid. They have to go hand in hand.
That was Abby Maxwell, President and CEO of Oxfam America, speaking with VOA's Straight Talk Africa host, Hedy Adams. The U.S. Senate on Thursday overwhelmingly rejected legislation that would have forced President Joe Biden to withdraw U.S. troops from Niger, where military officers seized power in July. The United States formally declared this month that there had been a military coup d'etat in Niger, which results in officially suspending assistance, but U.S. officials said there were no plans to change the U.S. troop presence in the country. Niger has been a partner for Washington's fight against Islamist insurgents who have killed thousands of people and displaced millions more in Africa. There are about 1,000 Department of Defense personnel in the country. Republican Senator Rand Paul, who sponsored the legislation, argued that the troops were improperly deployed without congressional approval and said Americans should not be at risk of getting caught in the crossfire of a conflict in Niger. Senator Ben Cardin, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said that if Americans withdraw, it could leave a vacuum that could be filled by Russia or its partner, Wagner mercenaries. Critics allege that China's infrastructure lending has saddled some poorer countries with loans they can't repay. In Uganda, Chinese investments have contributed to infrastructure development. However, some of the critics VOA spoke to are concerned about the long-term implications of Chinese loans.
Why these countries, African countries in general, and Uganda specifically, are moving towards China in terms of financing and loans is because we cannot access such funding from the multilateral lenders to build our infrastructure projects and therefore ensure sustainability for our country.
Uganda is in need of making heavy investments, and China has the capacity to put that investment to reality. What are the two kinds on the investment side? We needed a lot of infrastructure, especially in terms of roads and energy, which needed large monies and very quickly.
As we stand now, we have just about 9 running loans from China.
Around 75% and above is imported from China. And we import mobile phones, accessories, garments, textiles.
Now the quantum aside, the bigger challenge compared to Western borrowing is it has a higher cost. The terms of the loans are not similar to the Western terms of loans.
As a lender, they are being strategic. You have to put your money where you feel you reap the most benefits. For example, the oil roads. If they want to give you loans for the oil roads, they want to give you an airport, to fund an airport in Hoima. I think that is being strategic.
So much as we did the roads, the aspects of governance, selection of projects, implementation of projects, has left Uganda with a burden of the economy not growing as fast to generate sufficient revenues to repay the loans.
Ugandans are speaking to VOA on Kampala. We are excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, behind the scenes with Malawi's Madalitso Band.
Cervical cancer is one of the most successfully preventable and, if diagnosed early, one of the most treatable forms of cancer. But according to the World Health Organization, 70,000 women in Africa die every year due to cervical cancer. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we will discuss what cervical cancer is. We will also hear from experts on ways to ensure increased medical access for timely detection, care, and prevention. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
In other news, M23 rebels in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo launched a new offensive north of the provincial capital Goma on Thursday, as fighting with pro-government armed groups continued further south, according to AFP. Mortar fire and rounds of automatic weapons were heard on the southern outskirts of the town of Bambo, some 60 kilometers north of Goma a day before. A lawyer for Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko said Thursday that the detained politician had regained consciousness but remains in a very precarious condition on hunger strike. Sonko, a popular figure among young Senegalese who finished third in the last presidential race, began refusing food after being detained in late July. He later paused the protest measure after mediation but resumed his hunger strike on October 17. A new UNESCO report says Africa's fashion industry is growing rapidly to meet local and international demand, but inadequate investment limits its potential. Entitled "The Fashion Sector in Africa: Trends, Challenges, and Opportunities for Growth," the report released during Lagos Fashion Week says Africa's fashion industry, currently valued at $15.5 billion worth of exports annually, could triple over a decade with the right investment and infrastructure. Rugby fans across the world will be glued to their screens on Saturday to watch the 2023 World Cup finals that will witness a repeat match of 1995 tournament where South Africa's Springboks faced New Zealand's All Blacks. VOA's Mike Hovey has more.
The Springboks and the All Blacks have announced their squads for Saturday's clash. Valen Kirtley, the sports editor for Newsroom Africa, says rugby fanatics are expecting to watch world-class rugby.
For any neutral when it comes to rugby, this is the final that they all wanted. Certainly for South African and for New Zealand fans, this is a storied rivalry between these two nations.
Springboks captain Siya Kolisi echoed that sentiment.
It's huge. It's always big playing against the All Blacks, but to play it in the World Cup final when it's number 1 and 2 team in the world playing head-to-head, I don't think it's stuff that you can dream about because it doesn't happen often. I don't think it will happen in our lifetime again to have two teams like this.
Kolisi said the Springboks will make African rugby fans proud.
We see it each and every single day, and people tell us how they feel, and people send videos and tell us this is sometimes the only time they are happy about something is when we play. And also for us, it's for someone that is in my position right now, where I was when I was a kid, for them to know, yes, that it's a season that they're going through, it's a tough time, but it is possible for them to get out of it.
Sam Kane, Kolisi's New Zealand counterpart, said the All Blacks are ready for victory.
You know, we've played 2 finals, 2 knockouts, effectively more actually, in a row. So I trust that we're in a good spot there.
The clash between the rivals will be historic because the winner will be the first to have lifted the Webb Ellis Cup 4 times in the history of the tournament. Should South Africa win, it'll be back-to-back victories for the Springboks, who won the World Cup in Japan in 2019. In 1995, when the 2 teams faced off in the finals, the Springboks defeated the All Blacks 15-12. Mike Ove, VOA News, Washington.
It's time for our entertainment report, and joining us now is Heather Maxwell, host of VOA's Music Time in Africa radio program with the music from Malawi. Hello, Heather.
Hi, Lenore. Hello, everyone. Yes, I dusted off my cowboy boots for this one. As promised last week, here is a behind-the-scenes look into the roots of African banjo music with Madalitso Band. Rolling hills, horses, farms, historic towns, country roads. What does all this have to do with Malawi, a country 8,000 miles away in southern Africa? I'll tell you. It's banjo music, strings, driving rhythm, soulful harmonies. I'm Heather Maxwell at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where Malawi touches down in scenic Piedmont, Virginia, at the Barns of Rose Hill. Let's discover this African connection to American country and folk music with a visit by Malawian musicians Madalitso Band, who are currently touring the United States.
The music is come from the villages of Malawi, and they moved to Lilongwe, where they traveled around playing on the streets for 15 years until 2017, a concert in Zanzibar in front of a international audience, set off this path of touring around the world. Without further ado, I present them once again, Madalitso Band. Thank you.
People here, when they hear your music, feel like it sounds like American country, sometimes American folk. Your guitar is called a banjo guitar. You play it like with 4 strings and a tuning that is like the banjo. The babaton, you know, you play that with a slide. And we have an instrument here that's just 1 string that people play with a slide. Did they know that?
Did not know that. Yeah.
Your music is known as Malawi banjo music. So that confuses us as Americans because we feel like they must know about the banjo. So how can they explain the name of that?
Yeah, so in
Malawi, the distinction is a little bit different. So any kind of stringed instrument that we play that doesn't have electricity, we call that a banjo. And the one that has electricity, that's the one we call a guitar.
Okay. Clears that up. Are any of you, even you, Neil, since you also are a musician, influenced by American country music?
For me, there's definitely a lot of country influence because I grew up listening to country. And when I went to Malawi, I didn't know any of the language. So the song I would always play, Kenny Rogers, it was very popular. So that's how I entered. So I was accepted into the Malawian music space as a country musician, which was surprising that it's so well-loved, country music in Malawi.
So what has been your best song on the tour in the United States?
Nambe.
That's Nambe. What does that mean?
Nambe means it's a girl's name. Nambe is her name, so it's a love song for a girl called Nambe. Saying, Nambe, please love me. I love you. Oh. Why don't you love me back?
Oh. And that's it for entertainment this week. Back to you, Lenore.
The beautiful sound of Malawi's banjo. Heather, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Be sure to join Heather Maxwell's Entertainment Report every Friday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.